2 years after she forged my dead grandfather's signature, Victoria Whitman collapsed onto a folding chair in the Oakvale Community Center, while 1,900 people watched her on Facebook live stream. Her husband was being escorted out the back by an FBI agent. The bank she had defrauded sat in row 3. The North Carolina State Bar sat at my left shoulder. My 11-year-old daughter, whose mother's boat Victoria had allowed strangers to climb onto one Sunday in July, sat in the second row, holding Eleanor Mercer's hand. I am Ethan Brooks. I was a retired maritime attorney grieving my wife when Victoria decided the Shoreline I had owned since 1962 was a community amenity. She spent 19 months building a stage to humiliate me. She did not know I had been preparing for exactly that stage. This is the story of the quietest revenge I have ever built, and the loudest collapse a Karen has ever live-streamed on herself. Where are you watching from? Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Ethan Brooks, 47 years old. 20 years a maritime attorney out of Charleston, South Carolina, until the morning my wife Margaret sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said the word ovarian like it was someone else's weather report. She fought for 11 months. She lost in March. By the following October, I had closed my practice, packed our daughter Lily into a rented Tahoe, and driven 2 states north to the only piece of earth that still felt like it remembered Margaret's laugh. Lake Hollybrook sits in the gentle elbow where Mecklenburg County folds into Iredell, about 30 minutes north of Charlotte. My grandfather Harold built the cabin in '62 with his own 2 hands and a library book on framing. The roof sags a little, the screen door slaps. There's a widow's walk nobody walks on anymore. Out back, past the sweet gum in the muscadine vines, the land rolls down to 420 feet of shoreline that has, by a deed written in 1962, belonged exclusively and perpetually to the Brooks family. That deed is the heart of this story, but we'll get to that. Lily turned 11 the summer we moved in. She took to the water the way I'd hoped she would. She learned to swim off the end of the dock, while I watched with coffee and the uneasy silence every widowed father knows. She named the loons. She asked me to help her paint a birdhouse for the red-shouldered hawk that lived in the oak. Margaret would have loved all of it. Sometimes that thought was a gift, and sometimes it was a knife, and I never got to choose which. The boat was named Margaret Ann, a '98 Chris Craft launch I'd spent 3 winters restoring in Charleston before Margaret got sick. Mahogany inlay, brass cleats. She laughed the first time I showed it to her and said it looked like a lawyer's midlife crisis. Then she kissed me and named it herself. I met Victoria Whitman on my 17th day at the lake. She came up the gravel drive in a pearl-white Lexus SUV, parked sideways across 2 spaces I didn't have, and stepped out in a cream linen blazer over yoga pants, oversized Gucci frames balanced on a tight, bleached ponytail. She introduced herself as president of the Hollybrook Shores HOA and Shoreline Steward, a title, I would learn, that existed nowhere in the HOA bylaws because she had invented it. Ethan, she said, before I'd offered my name. May I call you Ethan? This community thrives when everyone contributes. She said it the way a snake says thank you. She handed me a glossy folder. Inside, a welcome letter, a dues schedule, and a document titled Shoreline Amenity Easement, executed 2007. It claimed that 60 feet of shoreline directly in front of my cabin, including my dock, was designated shared community access in perpetuity. It bore my grandfather's signature. It bore a notary seal. I looked at Victoria. Victoria smiled. I'm sure a man of your experience, she said, will understand the importance of honoring community covenants. I told her, politely, that I would need to review the document with counsel before participating in any community activity on my land. She laughed. A real laugh, shoulders up, teeth out. Oh, Ethan, this isn't really optional. Then she got back in her Lexus and drove off. And the next Sunday, I learned what Victoria Whitman did when a man said no. She didn't take no for an answer. She took keys. Sunday came in hot and smelling of cut grass. I was making pancakes when I heard the first car door slam. Then another, then a third. By the time I stepped onto the porch with a spatula still in my hand, there were 11 vehicles parked along my gravel drive, and a line of people in matching coral t-shirts carrying coolers, kayaks, and folding chairs across my lawn like a church picnic. The shirts said Hollybrook Paddle Day, Shoreline Stewards. A woman in a pink visor waved at me as she stepped over my tomato beds. A man set a Bluetooth speaker on the stump where Margaret used to read on Saturdays. Somebody had already strung a banner between two dogwoods. Someone else was laying out sliced watermelon on a folding table, like this was her backyard. I walked down to the dock. Victoria was already there, standing at the shoreline end, clipboard in hand, directing traffic like a cruise director in sensible wedges. A man I didn't know was untying the bow line on Margaret Ann. Two teenage boys were using my boat's starboard gunwale as a diving platform. A toddler in bright orange arm floats sat on the edge of the dock, bare feet in the water, no adult within 30 feet of him. "Excuse me," I said. The word came out smaller than I wanted. "Ethan," Victoria called, bright as a wedding announcement. "Come meet some neighbors." "Someone's on my boat." "Shared amenity, honey. We talked about this. There's a child unsupervised on the edge of the dock." She waved a hand without turning. "Kids know how to swim, Ethan. Relax." I went inside. Lily was at the window, watching a woman in yoga pants pick up the tin music box Margaret had left on the dock last October. The one Lily refused to let me move, and shake it like a maraca. My daughter's face did that quiet folding I'd learned to recognize after a year of grief counseling. I walked her to the bedroom. I told her to stay there. I kissed the top of her head and shut the door with both hands. Then I called the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Evan Holloway arrived 40 minutes later. Young, square shoulders, tan uniform pressed like a new dollar. He listened to me for 90 seconds. Then Victoria stepped in smooth as melted butter and handed him the shoreline amenity easement. He read it. He looked at the signature. He looked at me. "Sir," he said, "this looks like an official document. Best to work it out civilly with your neighbors." I asked him to at least check if anyone was supervising the toddler. He did. He came back and told Victoria to station a parent on the dock. Victoria thanked him with a squeeze of his forearm that made me want to burn the whole Sunday down. I did not burn it down. I went back inside. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I filed a formal records request with the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds for the complete chain of title on Lot 1A. Every instrument, every transfer, every easement, every notarized page recorded against that parcel from 1958 to the present. I paid the $24 expedite fee. I requested certified copies. Here's what most people don't know about land in the United States. The deed is one document, but the chain of title is the entire conversation the land has had with the government across time. Every mortgage, every easement, every lien, every release, all of it recorded, all of it dated, all of it discoverable for $24 and a signature. While Victoria was laughing on my dock, I was opening a window she didn't know existed. That afternoon, across the lake, in the sunroom of a pearl-white Lexus, Victoria scrolled through my search results. She had Googled me. She had found my Charleston bar admission. She had found the name of my former firm, Whitlock, Brooks, and Hale, Admiralty and Riparian Law. She called her husband Gregory. She told him to move the timeline up. 2 weeks later, at the Coastline Development Quarterly Meeting, a new line item appeared on the agenda. Accelerate Hollybrook Harbor Marina lease. Brooks' situation requires preemption. They thought they were cornering me. They were volunteering to be on record. The first HOA notice arrived 9 days later. Certified mail, pale blue envelope. The carrier lingered on my porch like he sensed weather. I signed for it and opened it at the kitchen counter with Lily eating cereal 3 feet away. Notice of covenant violation. Obstruction of shared community amenity. $3,200. Payable within 30 days. An additional surcharge of $400 per week until compliance. The signature at the bottom belonged to Howard Prescott, Esquire, attorney for the Hollybrook Shores, HOA. Below his name, a small logo, 2 overlapping waves. Coastline Development, LLC. Lily looked up from her cereal. "What's that, Daddy?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Grown-up male." She chewed. "Is it about the mean lady?" I said it wasn't. I said a lot of things that week I would later regret saying. Lies that small only hurt the person who tells them. 3 nights later, the HOA held its monthly community meeting at the Oakvale Community Center. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. A neighbor named Alan Mercer, retired postal worker, soft-spoken, bad knees, sent me the audio from the back row of his folding chair. Victoria opened with a new business item titled Non-Cooperation, Lot 1A. She spoke for 9 minutes. She never said my name more than 3 times. She used the phrase, the grieving widower who can't share with his neighbors, twice. She used the phrase, selfish entitlement, 4 times. A few people laughed, a few didn't. At the end, she called for a show of hands on doubling the fine. It passed, 22-4. I listened to the recording twice. The first time, my hands shook. The second time, I took notes, timestamps, exact quotations, names of every person who voted yes. I emailed the audio to myself, to my cloud backup, and to Thomas Whitlock, my former law partner, now senior counsel at the North Carolina State Bar's Enforcement Division. I wrote in the subject line, "Start a file, keep it open." Here's what most people don't know about defamation in North Carolina. You don't need hurt feelings. You need damages. You need a public statement. You need provable falsity. Victoria had given me 2 of the 3 already, on tape, in front of witnesses, with a vote attached. The third would come. The next morning, I logged into the North Carolina State Bar portal and reactivated my law license for pro bono work. The fee was $95. The waiting period was 3 business days. On the 4th day, I drafted and sent a formal cease and desist letter. I addressed it to 3 parties: Victoria Whitman as president, Howard Prescott as attorney of record, and Coastline Development, LLC, which, I noted, had no discernible legal standing to be copied on an HOA collections matter unless its interests were somehow entangled with the enforcement, which was exactly the point of copying them. The letter was 6 pages. It cited the North Carolina Planned Community Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the state's riparian rights statutes, and the 1968 Federal Clean Water Act as it applies to permitted docks on impoundment lakes. It did not threaten, it documented. It closed with a line I had used 1,000 times in Charleston. "Please govern yourselves accordingly." Howard Prescott responded in 6 days. On Coastline Development letterhead, he called the letter frivolous, my claims baseless, and warned of sanctions for harassment. He signed his name in blue fountain pen. And then, at the bottom of page 2, below his signature, he made the first mistake I was waiting for. He attached a letter of record, notifying me that construction on Shoreline Amenity Extension, Phase 1, would commence in 14 days. A 40-foot concrete dock expansion, driven into my shoreline, paid for by HOA assessments. Permitted, he claimed, by the 2007 easement. I printed his letter. I slid it into a folder. I labeled the folder Whitman, Evidence, Volume 1. Lily found me at my desk that night. "Daddy, are you winning?" I told her we weren't playing yet. I told her soon. Keith Donovan showed up on a Tuesday morning with 2 flatbeds, a mini excavator, and a crew of 5 men in yellow hard hats. He parked on my lawn. He stepped out of his truck, looked at me on the porch, and spat a brown stream of tobacco onto the grass Margaret planted 3 autumns ago. "Got permits," he said. "You don't." "HOA says I do." I asked to see them. He handed me a single sheet of paper stamped by the Hollybrook Shores HOA Architectural Review Committee. No Army Corps of Engineers permit. No Mecklenburg County Land Disturbance permit. No North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality certification. Nothing that would legally authorize a single shovel to break ground on a federally regulated impoundment shoreline. I told him so, quietly, in the clinical tone Margaret used to tease me about. He spat again. "Take it up with the HOA." Deputy Holloway rolled in behind the second flatbed. Same square shoulders, same pressed uniform. This time, no hesitation. He walked straight to me on the porch and told me that if I interfered with lawful HOA construction, I would be arrested for obstruction. I looked at him for a long second. He looked back, and something in his jaw tightened. He was following orders he already half suspected were wrong. I'd seen that face on junior associates. I didn't blame him. I also didn't argue. I went inside. I pulled 3 cameras from the hall closet, 2 Arlo cloud-connected units, and a 4K GoPro I'd bought for Lily's birthday. I mounted one on the eave of the boathouse, one under the soffit above the kitchen window, and the third high in the oak, wedged against the trunk where the red-shouldered hawk liked to roost. I set all 3 to continuous motion record. I paid the cloud subscription annually, so nobody could argue later that footage had been lost. Keith's crew drove cedar survey stakes into my shoreline for 6 hours. They worked while Lily was at school. They painted orange marks on my grandfather's cedar planks. One of them leaned his lunch cooler against the bow of Margaret Ann. That night I made a decision that still tastes like iron. At 11:47 p.m., in a cold drizzle, I untied Margaret Ann from the slip and motored her, running lights off, engine at idle, 11 miles north to the public marina at Cornelius. Lily rode with me, wrapped in Margaret's old barn coat, asleep against the side glass before we cleared the first cove. A marina hand named Walt, a man I'd paid $200 in cash that afternoon, met me at the transient dock and helped me tie off. He didn't ask questions. He handed me a thermos of coffee and a warm donut from the vending machine. Sometimes, kindness smells like burnt sugar and diesel. I drove home with Lily asleep in the passenger seat. The rain thickened. I thought about my grandfather. The next morning, I sent 3 emails before sunrise. The first was to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Wilmington District, attaching photographs of Keith's stakes, the HOA permit, and a clean, time-stamped record of construction activity on a federally regulated impoundment shoreline without a Section 404 permit. I cited 33 U.S.C. Section 1344. I requested an enforcement site visit. Here's what most people don't know about the Clean Water Act. Any construction that places dredged or fill material into navigable waters, including lake impoundments, requires a federal permit. Not a state permit, not an HOA vote, a federal permit. Penalties start at $25,000 per day, per violation. Criminal referrals are possible. The Corps does not answer to Alexis. The second email went to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality's Division of Water Resources, citing parallel state violations. The third went to Thomas Whitlock. Subject line: "Call me when you're awake. We're moving." I was about to close the laptop when a new message landed in my inbox. No subject. A Gmail address I didn't recognize. The body was one sentence. "I saw you on Nextdoor. I have files you need. M. Linden, former HOA secretary." I read it 3 times. Then I poured a second cup of coffee. I printed the message. I added it to the folder. Victoria was about to learn that a man who has already lost his wife has a very specific relationship with patience. I met Martha Linden on a Thursday afternoon at a Waffle House off Exit 36 in Concord. She chose the place. She told me to sit in the last booth by the window. She said she'd be wearing a navy cardigan and holding a brown accordion folder. She was 61. Her hands trembled slightly when she set the folder down between the ketchup and the sugar packets. "I kept copies," she said. "I kept everything." She had been the HOA's recording secretary from 2016 to 2024. She had resigned after what she called the notary situation. She had wanted to say something for a year. She hadn't known to whom. She slid the folder toward me. There were 4 documents inside. The first was an email from Victoria Whitman to Janice Holloway, dated April 11th, 2019. It read, "Janice, need Harold's signature lifted off the 04 zoning doc and placed on the attached easement. Backdate to 2007. You handle notary. 12 for you, as discussed. V." The second was a side-by-side scan of my grandfather's signature, the original from a 2004 rezoning comment letter, and the forged version on the 2007 Shoreline amenity easement. Every loop matched. Every pressure mark matched. They were the same signature, lifted pixel for pixel. The third was a draft pre-sale contract for a unit at Hollybrook Harbor, marked up by Gregory Whitman's hand. Under the included amenities section, he had underlined the words, "deeded private lakefront access with community dock rights," and written in the margin, "confirm with V before closing book." The fourth was a commitment letter from First Carolina Trust to Coastline Development, LLC, approving a $14.2 million construction loan. The collateral schedule listed, in black and white, rights of access and amenity under Hollybrook Shores Shoreline Amenity Easement, 2007. I sat the wait. Here is what I understood, slowly, as the sugar on the table blurred. My grandfather Harold Brooks died on September 14th, 2005. He had not signed anything in 2007. He had not authorized any easement on his shoreline. The document that Victoria Whitman had waved at me on my own dock, the document Deputy Holloway had cited to threaten my arrest, the document that underwrote a $14.2 million federally insured construction loan, was a forgery. Notarized by fraud, sold to a bank, monetized by a developer, weaponized against a widower. And I, who had practiced maritime and riparian law for 20 years, happened to live on the only piece of shoreline it had ever been attached to. I thought about Margaret, not about her death, about a sentence she used to say when I came home from court in a foul mood. "Don't get loud, Ethan. Get patient." I drove home the long way, past the cotton warehouses, past the red clay cuts along Highway 73, where the dogwoods were just starting to turn. I let the sun fall. I let Lily eat dinner at Alan Mercer's house next door. I sat in my grandfather's chair on the porch, opened the 1962 deed, and read the margin again in his hand. For the lake that fed us. I did not cry. I did not call a reporter. I did not drive to Victoria's house and knock on the door. I walked to my desk. I opened a blank legal pad, and at the top, in block letters, I wrote 5 words. Quiet title, Lis Pendens, Bar, Real Estate Commission, FBI. The hunt had a map now. I called Thomas Whitlock at 6:14 a.m. on a Friday. He picked up on the second ring. He had been at the bar 51 years. He had buried 2 wives and 1 son. He lived alone in a renovated tobacco barn outside Pittsburgh. He listened to me for 18 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, he said 1 word, beautiful. Then he said, 5 fronts. I wrote them down. Front 1, quiet title. A civil action in Mecklenburg County Superior Court seeking a judicial declaration that the 1962 Brooks deed controlled all riparian and littoral rights to Lot 1A, and that the 2007 Shoreline amenity easement was void ab initio, void from the beginning. Filed under NC General Statutes, Section 4110. Thomas would draft. I would sign as pro se co-counsel. Front 2, Lis Pendens. The instant we filed the quiet title action, we would record a notice of lis pendens against every deed that referenced the forged easement, including every unit at Hollybrook Harbor already under contract. Lis pendens is a Latin phrase. It means a lawsuit is pending. When it hits a title, every bank, every buyer, every title insurer in the state freezes. Closings stop, loans lock, developers bleed. Front 3, North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Formal complaint against Victoria Whitman, license number active, for misrepresentation and fraud in a real estate transaction. Parallel complaint to the North Carolina State Bar against Howard Prescott for knowingly asserting a fraudulent instrument. Front 4, criminal referral. We would hand-deliver a package to the FBI Charlotte field office. Bank fraud is federal the moment a federally insured institution is deceived. First Carolina Trust was FDIC. Gregory had deceived them on paper, under his own signature, with Victoria's forged document as collateral. Wire fraud counts would layer on top because the loan closing ran through interstate wires. Front 5, independent survey. Daniel Carter, an old friend from the Corps, would produce a certified Alta survey of Lot 1A, stamped by a North Carolina board-licensed surveyor, showing every boundary marker, every setback, every square foot of the 420-foot shoreline, unassailable, admissible in any courtroom in the state. Thomas paused after Front 5 and said, "Ethan, one more thing." "Yes." "Don't announce any of it, not one word. Let them keep talking." I agreed. Over the next 19 days, I did not post on Nextdoor. I did not respond to the HOA. I paid the $3,200 fine under protest and in writing, citing specifically that payment was made under duress and without waiver of claims. I filed the quiet title action on a Tuesday and the lis pendens on a Wednesday. I mailed Martha's folder, certified, signed, numbered, to the FBI, the Real Estate Commission, the State Bar, and the North Carolina Banking Commission. I met Sarah Whitfield from the Charlotte Observer at a diner in Davidson. I gave her nothing on the record. I gave her a roadmap. Daniel Carter walked my shoreline for 2 days with a total station and a drone. His final report ran 47 pages. Every cedar plank of my grandfather's dock, every stake Keith Donovan had driven, every encroachment, to the inch. In the evenings, I taught Lily the names of the documents, the way Margaret used to teach her the names of birds. Deed, easement, title, chain. Lily repeated them back while she colored. She drew a picture of our dock with a sign on it that said ours. She asked if she could give the drawing to Thomas. I said he'd like that. One night, I sat with her on the porch after the fireflies came out. The lake smelled of algae and cooling iron. She was quiet for a while. Then she asked, "Daddy, are you angry?" I thought about it. "I'm not angry anymore, kiddo. I'm accurate." She nodded. The next morning, First Carolina Trust called Gregory Whitman's office and requested an emergency collateral review. He did not return the call. Coastline Development broke ground on the Hollybrook Harbor showroom the following Monday. I drove past it on my way to pick up a prescription. The billboard on I-77 was 40 feet wide, glossy white. A cursive script declared, "Your private lakefront awaits." Beneath that, in smaller type, deeded community water access, 48 limited residences. Pre-construction pricing ends April 30th. I took a picture of it with my phone. I sent the picture to Thomas. He wrote back 3 words: "Keep the photo." Victoria launched her counteroffensive on the same Monday. She printed 800 flyers on cream cardstock, gold ink, and had a local teenager deliver them door to door across Hollybrook shores. The headline read, "Save our shoreline, stand against Ethan Brooks." The body described me as a litigious Charleston transplant, attempting to privatize our community's most cherished amenity. She quoted Deputy Holloway out of context. She included a QR code that linked to a GoFundMe. The GoFundMe had a goal of $40,000 for HOA legal defense. Within 48 hours, it had raised $610. I read the flyer at my kitchen table. Lily read it over my shoulder. She asked if the litigious word was bad. I told her it just meant a person who uses the courts. Some people say it like an insult. Some people say it like a job description. She went back to her coloring. Gregory hosted a preview gala at the Hollybrook Harbor Model Unit on Thursday evening. Champagne, harpist, 2 candidates for Charlotte City Council, 3 local realtors I knew by reputation. Victoria wore cream silk and her Gucci frames pushed up like a tiara. Sarah Whitfield attended as a freelance society writer. She took 14 photographs. She recorded, legally, under North Carolina's single-party consent law, the conversation in which Gregory told a prospective buyer that water access was already deeded, ironclad, done deal, trust me. He said it twice, on the record, on tape. Meanwhile, the Lis Pendens was doing its silent work. On Wednesday morning, First Carolina Trust's in-house counsel phoned Gregory and informed him that all Hollybrook Harbor closings were frozen, pending resolution of the encumbrance on Lot 1A. 3 buyers called their attorneys within 24 hours. By Friday, 2 had withdrawn earnest money. By the following Tuesday, a 4th filed a demand for refund under the North Carolina Interstate Land Sales Act. The bank sent Gregory a letter of concern on coastline development letterhead. The letter used the phrase material adverse event. In mortgage language, that phrase is a loaded pistol pointed at a balance sheet. Gregory responded the way small men respond when paper starts to choke them. On a Saturday afternoon, I was loading groceries into the back of my truck at the Harris Teeter on Bethel Church Road. A silver F250 pulled up 2 spaces over. Gregory got out. He was sweating through his golf shirt. He walked straight at me with his finger up. "You want to play games, Brooks? You want to play games with me?" I stopped loading. I did not put down the gallon of milk. I kept both hands visible. "I'm buying groceries, Gregory. You're destroying people's lives. I'm enforcing a deed. You think you're untouchable because your wife died?" I remember the quality of the light in the parking lot. I remember the smell of hot asphalt and gasoline. I remember a woman with a toddler in a cart, glancing over and then looking away fast. What I do not remember is whatever I said next, because I do not think I said anything. I looked at him. I put the milk in the truck. I shut the tailgate. I got in. I drove away. The parking lot security camera, mounted on the corner of the cart corral, recorded all of it. I mailed a certified copy of the footage to Thomas Whitlock on Monday morning. By Wednesday, the FBI had opened a preliminary inquiry. By Friday, the North Carolina Banking Commission had issued a subpoena to First Carolina Trust. The paper had started to move on its own. Victoria called for a community tribunal. The formal notice arrived on April 3rd. Certified mail, return receipt, same pale blue envelope the HOA used for everything. The notice informed me that the Hollybrook Shores Homeowners Association would hold a special enforcement hearing at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, April 14th, at the Oakvale Community Center for the purpose of addressing ongoing amenity violations and community disruption by homeowner Ethan Brooks, Lot 1A. The hearing would be live-streamed on the Hollybrook Shores Community Facebook page. Attendance was strongly encouraged. The HOA had retained a professional videographer. The HOA had arranged for a podium, a projector, and folding chairs for 250. I read the notice. I read it again. I placed it carefully on the kitchen table. Then I laughed for the first time in 7 weeks. Victoria had just built me a stage. She thought it was her stage. She thought she was about to humiliate a grieving widower in front of a live stream. She did not know that I had already been preparing for exactly this room. I RSVP'd within the hour. Polite, brief, Mr. Brooks will attend and intends to present evidence in his defense. He will be accompanied by counsel. Then I made 7 phone calls. Thomas Whitlock cleared his Tuesday evening. Daniel Carter agreed to bring the stamped ALTA survey and the drone footage. Sarah Whitfield confirmed she would attend as a credentialed journalist, with a second Charlotte Observer photographer. A woman named Monica Reeves, special agent with the FBI Charlotte field office, confirmed she would be present in her official capacity. A representative from First Carolina Trust's legal department agreed to attend as an interested party of record. Colonel Raymond Hale, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Wilmington District, retired, agreed to attend as a subject matter expert on federal shoreline permits. And Martha Linden, the woman with the accordion folder, agreed to sit in the 3rd row with her own attorney. Not one of them appeared on any HOA attendance list. In the days before the hearing, Victoria escalated the way cornered people always do. She sent a second round of flyers. She recorded a tearful video for the community Facebook page, in which she described herself as a target of sophisticated legal bullying. She scheduled a last-minute unity rally for the Sunday before the hearing. 17 people attended. 3 of them were her cousins. I did not respond to any of it. On the Saturday before the hearing, Alan Mercer knocked on my door. He was holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. His wife, Eleanor, stood behind him on the porch. "We don't know much about the law, Ethan," Alan said, "but we know what we've seen." Eleanor and I spoke to 9 neighbors. Most of them didn't vote yes on that fine. A few did because they were scared. "We wanted you to know that," Eleanor added, quietly. "We'll sit in the front row, if that helps." I thanked them. I accepted the casserole. I closed the door and stood in the kitchen for a moment, with my hand flat on the counter. Margaret had believed in neighbors. It had taken me a year and a half to remember why. On Monday night, I tucked Lily in. She was reading A Wrinkle in Time. She looked up from the book. "Daddy, can I come to the meeting tomorrow?" "It's going to be loud, sweetheart. It's going to be long, but it's about Mom's doc." I sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. The lamp cast a warm oval on the ceiling. A barred owl called from the oak. I thought about all the rooms I had walked into in 20 years of courtroom practice, and all the things I had asked strangers to believe. I thought about my daughter, who had watched me fold every day since her mother died. "Okay," I said, "you can come, but you sit next to Mr. Mercer, and you leave when I tell you to leave." She nodded solemnly, the way 11-year-olds nod when they have been granted adult clearance. I turned out the lamp. The lake was quiet. The wind moved through the sweet gums. Tomorrow, Victoria Whitman would sign her name on her last act as president. The Oakvale Community Center smelled of burnt coffee and floor wax. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. By 6:55 p.m. on April 14th, every one of the 250 folding chairs was filled, and another 40 people stood along the back wall. A Facebook live stream showed 341 viewers and climbing. Victoria's videographer crouched at the foot of the podium, adjusting his lens. Victoria wore cream linen and a string of pearls. She opened the binder in front of her with ceremonial slowness. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we address the ongoing violation of community amenity by homeowner Ethan Brooks of Lot 1A. The board has gathered substantial—" "Mrs. Whitman," I said. She stopped. She looked up. I was standing at the back of the room, in a gray suit I had not worn since Margaret's funeral. Lily sat between Alan and Eleanor Mercer in the 2nd row, hands folded in her lap, hair braided the way her mother used to braid it. Thomas Whitlock stood at my left shoulder. Daniel Carter stood at my right, carrying a black portfolio. "Before you continue," I said, "I'd like to introduce my guests." Victoria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. 6 people stood up, one by one, from different rows of the room. Each walked to the front. Each placed a laminated identification card face up on the HOA's long folding table. Thomas Whitlock, Senior Counsel, North Carolina State Bar Enforcement Division. Colonel Raymond Hale, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Wilmington District, retired. Daniel Carter, Professional Land Surveyor, North Carolina Board License 4409. Sarah Whitfield, Staff Investigative Reporter, Charlotte Observer. Nathan Holloway, Assistant General Counsel, First Carolina Trust, N.A. And, last, a woman in a navy blazer and low heels, who opened a leather wallet and set a gold badge on the table beside the others. Special Agent Monica Reeves, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Charlotte Field Office. The room went so quiet, I could hear the fluorescent hum hit a different pitch. "Mrs. Whitman," I said, "with the board's permission, I would like to use your projector." Howard Prescott, seated behind her at the long table, began to gather his papers with trembling hands. Victoria did not move. She said, very softly, "Go ahead." I walked to the projector and plugged in a flash drive. The first slide went up. My grandfather's 1962 deed. All riparian rights and fee simple, including the entire literal boundary of Lot 1A, to heirs and assigns forever. The word forever was the size of a melon on the screen. Somebody in the room exhaled audibly. The second slide, a side-by-side of Harold Brooks's real 2004 signature and his forged 2007 signature, identical, pixel by pixel. The third slide, Harold Brooks's certified death certificate, dated September 14, 2005, 2 years before he allegedly signed the easement. The fourth slide, Victoria's 2019 email to Janice Holloway. "Janice, need Harold's signature lifted off the 04 zoning doc and placed on the attached easement. Backdate to 2007. You handle notary. 12 for you, as discussed." The fifth slide, the First Carolina Trust collateral schedule listing the forged easement as security for Gregory's $14.2 million construction loan. The sixth slide stayed on the screen for a long moment. The Hollybrook Harbor promotional brochure, with Gregory's handwritten margin note, confirm with V before closing book. Nobody clapped. Nobody booed. The room was a held breath. I stepped to the microphone. "Mrs. Whitman, for 19 months, you told this community that I would not share. You sat in meetings and called me a selfish widower. You doubled my fines. You sent a deputy onto my land. You drove stakes into my grandfather's shoreline. Let me share something with you now. You signed my dead grandfather's name. You sold an easement you never owned. You used a forged document to underwrite a federally insured loan, and the bank you defrauded is sitting in row 3. Victoria's knees went first. She caught the edge of the table. Someone helped her into a chair. Someone brought water. Gregory, at the back, turned for the door. He made it 4 steps before Special Agent Reeves's partner, a man in a charcoal suit I had not noticed until that moment, stepped into his path and quietly showed his credentials. Deputy Evan Holloway, in uniform against the rear wall, walked slowly up the center aisle. He stopped at my row. He looked at me. "Mr. Brooks, I was wrong. I'm sorry." Sarah Whitfield was typing faster than any human being I have ever watched type. The live stream hit 1,900 viewers. Lily reached up and took my hand. 6 months is a long time when the paper is moving against people who thought they were untouchable. Victoria Whitman surrendered her North Carolina real estate license on June 2nd. She was indicted on July 18th on 1 count of forgery, 1 count of uttering a forged instrument, and 1 count of conspiracy to defraud. All H-class felonies under North Carolina law. She accepted a plea on September 9th. 18 months of supervised probation, $87,000 in restitution to the affected Hollybrook Harbor buyers, a permanent bar from serving on any homeowners association board in the state. Gregory was indicted by a federal grand jury on 4 counts of bank fraud, 2 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of making false statements to a federally insured institution. Coastline Development terminated him on the morning the indictment went public. Hollybrook Harbor filed for Chapter 11, 11 days later. First Carolina Trust foreclosed on the property before winter. A regional nonprofit eventually bought the condo shells at auction and converted them into workforce housing for teachers and firefighters. Howard Prescott, attorney of record, was suspended by the North Carolina State Bar for 5 years. Janice Holloway surrendered her notary commission and pled to a misdemeanor. Deputy Evan Holloway, no relation, transferred to the Sheriff's Community Liaison Division. He sent me a handwritten letter in August. I keep it in a drawer. The Hollybrook Shores HOA was restructured under a court-appointed monitor. My $3,200 fine was refunded with 8% interest. The Shoreline amenity easement was struck from every deed it had ever touched, and a new chain of title was recorded, affirming what my grandfather's 1962 instrument had always said. I did not put a fence around my shoreline. I could have. I had every legal right. But Margaret once told me that the people who win in the end are the people who refuse to let the fight shrink them. And I did not want my daughter to grow up on a lake surrounded by wire. Instead, on a Saturday in October, I stood at the far end of the 420-foot shoreline, near the cove where the loons nested, and I watched Lily cut a blue ribbon with a pair of kindergarten scissors. The sign behind her read, "Margaret Ann Public Fishing Pier, open to all who respect the water, in memory of Margaret Brooks, for the lake that fed us." The pier was built with the HOA's refunded fines, a matching grant from the Piedmont Land Conservancy, and 60 weekends of volunteer labor from neighbors who had voted against me without knowing what they were voting against. Alan Mercer ran the ribbon end. Eleanor brought lemon bars on a cardboard platter. Thomas Whitlock wore a tie Margaret had given him the Christmas before she died. The Margaret Ann Waterfront Trust, incorporated as a 501c3 in August, now funds three things: a $5,000 annual scholarship for a rising senior in the marine biology program at UNC Charlotte, a small legal aid fund for North Carolina homeowners facing HOA overreach, with Thomas as volunteer counsel, and free summer swimming lessons on the pier for any child in Iredell or Mecklenburg County who wants them. 29 kids signed up the first season. Sarah Whitfield's three-part series in the Charlotte Observer won the North Carolina Press Association's Investigative Award in November. She mentioned my name twice and Martha Linden's 4 times. That ratio was correct. Lily still learns the names of the loons. The red-shouldered hawk still roosts in the oak. Margaret Ann still slides out of her slip every Sunday morning, mahogany gleaming, cedar planks humming under my bare feet. Sometimes Lily rides with me. Sometimes she brings a friend. Sometimes I go alone, and I let the engine idle in the middle of the cove, and I say my wife's name into the water the way you say a prayer. I am not angry anymore. I am accurate. I am patient. I am a father. I am a neighbor. If you have a Victoria in your life, here is what I will tell you. Do not get loud. Get the deed. Get the chain of title. Get the documents. Let them talk themselves onto the record. A person who signs a dead man's name always signs their own with it. If this story meant something to you, share your own HOA nightmare in the comments. Subscribe so you do not miss what happens next week, when a retired iron worker in Montana discovers that his neighbor's property line fence is standing on 11 acres of federal mineral rights. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?
Friends, thank you for staying with this one to the end. I think Victoria Whitman's downfall hits the way it does because she handed it to herself. A false signature, a greedy husband, a bank she thought she could fool, and a life dream she built to humiliate a grieving father. Ethan never raised his voice. He didn't pause on next door. He put the chance of title. He reactivated his license. He fired the list penance, and he let a dead man's false signature do the talking in a federal courtroom. The lesson is simple, and it has saved homeowners across this country. The deed is only one page. The chance of title is the whole conversation. When an HOA tells you what you own, do not argue with them in the driveway. Pull the record, read them slowly. Document everything. Let them keep talking until they have talked themselves onto the page. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a Victoria in your neighborhood? What did you do? If tonight's story gave you something you needed, hit subscribe. Next week, we head to Montana, where a retired iron worker finds out his neighbor's property line fence is standing on 11 acres of federal mineral rights. You will not want to miss how this one ends.